Good morning, everybody. It's just after 10 a.m. and I want to welcome you to Coffee with CEF. And so thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for so many of you who have joined us for most or all of these episodes. It is a real joy to see you every week in the midst of some really challenging times that seem to become more challenging by the day. This morning we have special guests from around the world, and this is really exciting. We have our first international special guest. I am really thrilled to welcome Martina Amengual. We also have Kathleen Domingo and Isaac Cuevas from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles Office of Life, Justice, and Peace. Martina is joining us from Buenos Aires, Argentina for Scholas Occurrentes, which is an international global education program founded by Pope Francis. The past 2 weeks have seen devastating events across the country, human rights abuses, racial injustice, and bigotry. These events have impacted every corner of our society, and that includes our children, schools, and families, and especially the underserved who are living on the margins. This morning, I am very grateful to welcome Kathleen Domingo. She's the Senior Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace, and Isaac Cuevas, the Director of Immigration and Public Affairs.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Katie, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And rather than really a statement, I think it was probably just a little more appropriate to, open up a little bit and be a little vulnerable and share just some of the feelings and emotions that I think all of us are having right now. It's been a really troubling time. Over the course of the last couple of days, as a family, we've sat up and watched the news and seen things go, bad in our country at all levels. And we've prayed as a family, and we've tried to explain to our kids what's going on right now, not just from a standpoint of the present, but also historically and contextually. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley out here in Los Angeles, in a lower middle income, high density Hispanic neighborhood. My mom purposely wouldn't send me to the local high school that was designated in my area because it was there were too many gangs, and so I had to go to a school that was 3 miles away in the opposite direction, in one of the better neighborhoods. Personally, I've had situations happen where I felt like it was a certain amount of injustice, and by no means do I claim to know what that's like for other communities or other ethnicities, but I think everything that has happened in the course of the last couple of days really comes from a place of hurt and despair, and a lot of what we're seeing is just this burst of emotions and not knowing how to channel all of that. As a director of immigration affairs, I was thinking about this, and anytime that something happens in the universe of immigration, something negative, I usually have a very good understanding of how to take those situations and channel them into something positive. And over the course of these last couple of days, I just, it's been hard. It's been hard, and I think mostly for me, from a standpoint of like not knowing what else and how more we can, what to do and how we can help. Our office has been for quite some time now. Before all of this happened, our office has been involved in some of these conversations with our community leaders, not just from the civic standpoint, but also leaders in the African American community, and it's hard. Many times when we have these conversations, it's only the African American community that comes out, and so it feels like a lot of these emotions kind of stay in this bubble, and I think it's part of what we're seeing here is that it's time for the conversation to kind of go a little bit bigger. So with that, I mean, I think it's just my way of again being open and sharing a little bit of the sentiment and what I feel and what's going on right now, while at the same time trying to be as supportive and find the Catholic approach to what this is, and not just for my community and my country, but for my family and hopefully for generations to come.
Thank you, Isaac. Kathleen?
Well, thank you, Isaac. I want to thank you for sharing that personal reflection. I think so many of us are feeling those similar emotions, and it's helpful to have them named and have them spoken, so that we can all recognize, what we're feeling. This morning, I actually wanted to share a little bit of theology, if you'll excuse me. I think, part of it for us as Catholics is wondering, how do we in this moment bring our faith to bear in the public square? How do we bring our faith into these really charged conversations? There's so much in our world right now. There's so much on the news that's partisan. Everything's partisan, right? Whether you look a certain way, whether you hold the Bible in your hand or don't hold the Bible in your hand, whether you cross the street or whether you kneel or whatever, everything has partisan implications. But I'd also like for us to focus a little bit on the implications theologically. What does it mean to be a Catholic at this moment, and how can we affect the culture? And so because I'm just a super Catholic nerd, I brought with me into quarantine the Compendium on Catholic Social Teaching. And so I'm gonna reference that a little bit this morning. I hope all of you are aware that we have a really rich Catholic social teaching in our church. And so, I think at the beginning, what we just want to really name and make sure we're all understanding is that racism is a mortal sin. This isn't something optional. It's not something we can stand on the sidelines and say, well, I'm a good Catholic, I go to Mass on Sundays, so it's okay if I'm a little bit racist. That's not okay. Racism is a mortal sin, and it's called that very clearly. It's an offense against God, and it's an offense against his creation of the dignity of every human person. And it's important to understand that that is integral to our faith as Catholics. So if you hear people talking about, this might be sort of a tangential issue, or this is an issue for maybe those people or something, it's really important that we combat that and recognize this is an issue at the heart of who we are as Christians and as children of God and as brothers and sisters in Christ. I think it's also really important to recognize that diversity is itself a gift. I don't know about you, but I've been spending a lot of time in nature lately, right? In our own backyards, we're kind of stuck in our neighborhoods, taking walks through the neighborhood. And if you look around, everything is blooming. Everything is, it's spring. And we see the beautiful colors of nature. And you don't just see one kind of flower or one kind of bird or one kind of tree. You see the diversity of God's creation, and you realize that that's what's good about creation. That's what's beautiful about creation. That's how God intended it. And so when we look around at our brothers and sisters, the diversity is a gift. And that's something too, I think, that's important for us to name and to state at this moment, that it's not as though diversity is somehow something we have to tolerate. In fact, it's the very gift of creation. And we know that before the beginning of time, God intended and loved each of us into existence, that we are unique and unrepeatable human beings. And each one of us, we know, God created as a gift for himself. So here's a little theology for you. What does God need? If God had a birthday, what gift would we give him? There's nothing we could possibly give him because he gave all the gifts to himself already. And we are a gift that he created for himself, each and every one of us. So I think that's really helpful. If you're as awash in social media as I think all the rest of us are, you'll see that, sometimes we see some of the protesters and especially some of the folks who are really doing the looting and things like that. And there are people who are calling them names or trying to really belittle them as human beings. And it's important to remember each and every one of those people was created as a gift by God for himself. I think that that's something that as Catholics in this moment, we can insert into these conversations and really help people to have that perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about what is our job right now. I think our job is exactly those kinds of things. It's to lead the conversations with this understanding of the truth of creation, the truth that we are all brothers and sisters of a loving God, that God created each one of us out of love and for love. I think it's also really important that we understand that racism is a sin, but it's not only a corporate sin. that each and every one of us has some kind of unforgiveness in our hearts. And we each bear, in some way, to some degree, a distrust or an unloving spirit towards someone else. And whether it's because of the color of their skin, or because they did something we don't like, or they think something we don't like, or they're in a political party that we don't like, if we root out that distrust and the unforgiveness in our own heart, we will be making great strides toward rooting out injustice and unforgiveness in the entire world. And because this is a webinar sponsored by CEF, I want to definitely make a plug that I think one of the very best things that we as a church and as a Catholic community can do is to support our Catholic schools. We know that Catholic education is really the gem of our Catholic Church right now, and we know that it has the ability to change lives and transform communities. I'm sure you're all as familiar with the statistics as I am, but I'll give you just a little example. My husband is an educator. He was principal of Blessed Sacrament School in Hollywood for a number of years, and there we really saw firsthand that in that particular community, the graduation rate is about 50% for kids attending LAUSD schools. But the minute they got into Catholic schools, the graduation rates were pretty much 100%. The acceptance rates for kids coming out of Catholic high schools, those same exact kids from the same exact homes, the same exact neighborhoods, were essentially 100%. Catholic education makes a huge difference. And it's, yes, it's because of the small class sizes, and yes, it's because of the discipline, and yes, it's because of the, the commitments of the teachers, but we also know very clearly that it's also because we instill faith in kids, and a belief in a God who loves them unconditionally, gives them meaning and purpose, and it can change lives and change families and change entire neighborhoods. So I want to just give that plug for Catholic education and for all of our teachers and principals and staff that are doing a great job day in and day out to help kids in need. So thanks, everyone. That's my little theological reflection for the morning.
Kathleen, thank you so much. We really appreciate you and Isaac coming this morning and speaking to us. It was a real gift to have you today. If anyone would like more information about the Archdiocese of Los Angeles response, or Archbishop Gomez, his response, which was part of a Pentecost homily, you can visit lacatholics.org. To pivot a little bit, but not really, because Kathleen, thank you for introducing Catholic education as the gem of our church right now and a solution to so many problems facing children and families in our communities. I'm really pleased right now to introduce our first international guest speaker on Coffee with CEF, Martina Amengual. Martina joins us today from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and is the coordinator of global expansion for Scholas Occurrentes, a global education project promoting a culture of encounter among high school students, and was launched by Pope Francis. We are very, very excited that Scholas will open a new headquarters for the United States in Los Angeles soon, and this was announced back in December 2019. Unfortunately, the launch has been postponed due to the global pandemic, but we are really anxiously and excitedly awaiting Scholas in our own neighborhood of Los Angeles. So normally I would start by asking my guests about the morning coffee, but since it's afternoon for you, since you are in a different time zone, you might not have coffee. What do you have today?
I do have some coffee because I woke up very early today, so I need to be awake. And I brought this mug that I don't know if you read, but it says Lake Tahoe because I bought it there, and it's like my heart in California. I've been working there for 6 months, so that is why I have this mug.
That is awesome. I love Lake Tahoe, and I'm sure a lot of other people who are watching right now love Lake Tahoe too. It is a very beautiful place.
Yes, totally.
Now, I would love if you could start out by telling us more about Scholas and your role and the programs and everything you do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure for us to be able to share what we do, especially in LA, that we are just starting there. So it's very nice for us that other people knows what Scholas is about. Scholas Occurrentes, I will start by the name of the foundation, that it tells a lot, because Scholas Occurrentes, it means schools for encounter. That is what it says. It's in Latin, but it means schools for encounters. And it's an international non-profit organization that was launched and created by Pope Francis 20 years ago, before he became the Pope, when he was the Archbishop in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and his name was Jorge Bergoglio. So at that moment in Argentina, we were living a great crisis, like today, because I think today the world is also in a great crisis. At that moment in the year 2000, Argentina was going through a social, political, and economical crisis, the biggest in its history. And at that moment, Jorge Bergoglio thought that in order to overcome to this crisis, we needed to reestablish our educational pact as a society. And he believed that the way of reestablishing this pact was promoting a culture of encounter. Cultures of encounter, it means a new culture in which all human beings can coexist in harmony. That is why diversity is something that is essential in all the educational proposal of Scholas. That is why this is not a Catholic institution, it's an ecumenical institution, because what we try is to convoke every time we do an educational experience, youth and young people from different countries, different religions, different social backgrounds, because in that way we believe this culture of encounter is going to be achieved. And the way of achieving this culture of encounter, of course, is through education, basing that education in three main pillars that are related to three languages that Pope Francis always talks about, that is our head, our heart, and our hands. He believes that the education we need today needs to connect the three languages. That is why we have three pillars in the organization to work with, that are sports, art, and technology, because are the spaces where we find these three languages can be connected. That's a little bit about Scholas. Today we are present in 15 countries, with offices in 15 countries, but at the same time we have a network, a worldwide network, where 190 countries are being represented, because 500,000 institutions are part of that network.
That's amazing. And we are really, really grateful that Los Angeles is going to be part of that network too. Of course, a lot of your work is online because you are bringing together people from all corners of the globe. Could you tell us a little bit about how Scholas has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic specifically?
Well, I will respond to that sharing firstly a video that I would like to share with you, and after that I'm going to explain, but I think that the video is going to explain it better than me. So I will share my screen.
I'm not living this.
I'm stressed, like everyone.
Actually, the situation is. Yo soy la hermana mayor, entonces me toca pues tomar esa parte.
Agobio demasiado.
No hay un poquito de miedo porque mi madre sí que
trabajaba en un hospital, llora porque no quiere ir a trabajar.
Scared, but more.
el cuerpo se siente
Ansiedad,
Cero
abrazo. Un bebé está bonito.
Nadie tiene miedo, o sea, yo tengo miedo.
Mantener durante demasiado tiempo emociones negativas lo que hace es deprimir el sistema inmunitario y eso favorece que nos pongamos enfermos más a menudo o que ante una enfermedad tardemos algo más en recuperar.
emociones que pueden generar que el miedo se transforme en pánico y en parálisis de accionar. Y la acción es el encuentro, y el encuentro genera motivación.
Ciao a tutti, bienvenidos a todos y a todas to our first Global Youth Virtual Meeting.
Yes, here.
Son las 9 de la mañana aquí en México.
Hola,
Madrid, vayamos a... Soy de Argentina, Misiones.
de Panamá.
Tenemos distintas formas de ver la vida, pero que en realidad todas están bien. No hay algo bueno, no hay algo malo.
El poder sentir que no estaba sola, estar en compañía, ver la situación de otros países, me ayudó muchísimo.
Scholas è una boccata d'aria di speranza, di unione.
Compartiendo y hablando de lo que nos pasa con otros que les pasa lo mismo en otros lugares, nos ayuda a que nosotros estemos mejor, fomenta nuestras emociones positivas y nuestra propia autoestima crezca.
Gracias a todos esos jóvenes, mi vida cambió, mi mente cambió, dio un giro 360 grados. Ahora soy un joven que tiene metas, que tiene sueños.
El hecho de estar con otras personas activa todas estas emociones positivas y eso influye, por supuesto, en aspectos tan importantes como la resiliencia, el hecho de superar los problemas que se van produciendo a lo largo de la vida.
Los ratitos positivos que tenemos en la cuarentena provocan mucho alivio y generan mucho bienestar.
Perché rappresentano per me una spirale di emozionalità.
Esos encuentros exponencian emociones positivas en las personas y en los chicos. Y ese sentirse que hay muchos en diferentes situaciones, pero que pasan lo mismo que uno y que pueden apoyarse en eso, me parece que solo apoya a lo positivo y al bienestar.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's a little bit long, the video, but it's a way of showing what we are doing today. As I mentioned before, Scholas was born to give a response to a crisis that my country was living at that moment, and Jorge Bergoglio saw that, and he realized that through the youth and through education, that was the way of creating this culture of encounter. And today, in this new global country that crisis that we are living because of COVID-19, Scholas felt the responsibility to give an answer and to give a response to that problem. As you might know, according to UNESCO, 1.5 billion students around the world were affected because these measures of isolation that most of the governments implemented in the countries. And this has a lot of consequences, not only in anxiety, sadness, stress, but also affecting the dropout rates in a lot of vulnerable countries, because we are seeing that it's hard for some students to go back to schools once this pandemic finishes. Also in vulnerable countries where big families live in maybe a small house, or where they don't have a place where to be, and children need to be alone because parents need to go to work and they are not attending to school. The risk of drug abuse, violence, teen pregnancy are also some of the consequences that that this pandemic can bring. So in this context is that Scholas felt the need to hear the voice of the young people in this context, to share what they are experiencing in this situation, how them and your family and their families are being affected, what changed in their lives, and also have a space to debate about the future of education. Because as 20 years ago, Pope Francis realized that education was in crisis and that we as society need to reestablish that educational pact, we feel that the crisis we are living today, it's also an opportunity for us to rethink education. What is the education we are giving to our youth today? That is why we have been doing this international youth encounters with students from 20 different countries from all over the world. We have been doing this since March, so more than 2 months already every week. And after that, we opened also a space for teachers and for parents, understanding the important role they have in education. We have also created a space where parents, teachers, and the youth could debate about the future of education, all of them together. So that is a little bit what we have been doing, and the video you saw shows the impact these virtual encounters are having, especially in the emotional health of the participants. There is an increase of their motivation, their desire to do things for others, their feeling of joy, of pro-sociality after participating on this encounter. And there is a very big decrease of their feeling of loneliness, sadness. They are feeling with hope after participating on these encounters. That is why a lot of doctors and psychologists suggested us to maintain these virtual encounters weekly, because this is a space that students are willing to have every week. So that's a little bit how Scholas is responding to this crisis today.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to be able to see students and to be able to see students thriving right now. So thank you. We're really grateful that you could share that with us. Can you tell us about the plans for the headquarters in Los Angeles and what that's going to look like in the future?
Well, we have opened our headquarters there in December in an event that we have there at the Archdiocese, where the Pope had the chance to have a video conference to inaugurate the headquarters. Since these first months of the year, we've been establishing the organization there in all the legal part. And our idea is to start implementing our programs in the following semester. We don't know quite well how the different countries will evolve with this crisis, and if classes are going to come, students are going to go back to classes. We know that in Latin America, for example, a lot of governments already announced that schools are not coming back until next year. So we are adapting our programs in every country, because we used to work with students at school. But what we are planning for this year in LA and in all the United States is to do a proposal of these virtual encounters, but at a local level, where not only students, but also teachers and parents can be part of a dialogue to see what are the new challenges that we are facing in education, and how are going to continue after this pandemic. So we are planning to implement 8 of these virtual encounters at a local level. We would like to have like representation of all the country. And of course, as soon as we can, maybe in the fall or after, we would like to start implementing our programs that are presential programs. The main programs of the organizations are Scholas Citizenship, that is the 6-day program where 350 students from different schools of a same community, they share 1 week, and they identify the 2 main problems that affect them in their community. And after that, they think all together solutions for those problems. And at the last day, they present these proposals to the local authorities. For example, well, they might, in some countries, they chose as a problem suicide, discrimination, violence. We did a pilot last year with some students in Miami, and they chose as a problem mental health and gun violence at school. So they elaborate different projects related to those two problems. And after that, we have a second program that is called Scholas Jam, that is a technology program where they develop those projects to make them happen. So it's all a process where they make those solutions and those ideas they came up with in Scholar Citizenship, they implemented after through this program. We have another program that is called School of Educators, where we train some of these students to become educators in their community through this pedagogical proposal of Scholas. And we have also some programs related to sports that are called Sports with Values, and other programs related to universities that it's called Scholas Chairs, where university teachers and researchers and academics are involved.
That is also exciting. I'm getting so excited just imagining how that's going to really affect so much change in the Los Angeles community. And so, I mean, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much to you and to Scholas for choosing Los Angeles as the headquarters. That's going to be really incredible for us. So how can we support Scholas?
Well, of course that at this moment where we are starting in a very big country as is the United States, for us spreading the voice and letting everyone know about this organization, that it's old and new, because Scholas was born from an idea 20 years ago, but as an organization, it has been born when Pope Francis assumed as a pope in the year 2013. So Scholas was born 8 years ago. And spreading the voice and letting all the people know about Scholas is a great way to support us. And of course, we at this moment, we need some seed donations to start with our programs. These virtual encounters are free for all the participants, but we need to finance that activity. So we are looking for funds for these activities and for the ones that we are planning in the future in the presential mode.
This is how you could get in touch with Martina. This is her email address if you are interested in learning more. And the website for Scholas is there as well. So if you would like to learn more about being a funder, about opportunities for students in the future, you can contact Martina or visit the Scholas site. So I wanted to ask Isaac and Kathleen, how would you suggest that we as Catholics act right now?
So I can answer first, and then Isaac might have some additional comments. I think that rather than remove ourselves from the current conversation, I would encourage us to get involved, to be willing to have difficult conversations with people, but to really bring our positive voice to the table. And I think what's needed right now is really a very sincere recognition that, you know, we've done a lot of failing, not only as a country and as institutions, but as individuals. We've done a lot of failing. We haven't listened to people. We haven't heard them. We haven't, our country has never gone back and made actual reparations, meaningful reparations and meaningful change for so many sins of the past. And those sins get carried into the future. And then we're stuck with the baggage and we don't necessarily know what to do with that. And so I think this is a time for great humility to come to the conversation and say, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know what your experience is, but I'm willing to hear you out. I'm willing to learn from your experience. And then I'm willing for us to walk together in the future and create something new. And I think together we can create a culture that is just, that is truly loving, and that brings that understanding that we're all brothers and sisters in Christ into the forefront and into sort of the foundation of the culture. But it does take a sense of humility, and it takes the ability to sort of distance yourself from partisanship rhetoric. and to really be willing to listen and engage in conversation. So I think, as Martina was describing the work of her organization and the work that she's doing with young people, I think that's exactly what even we adults need to take advantage of, that same spirit. And I think that's what's needed right now.
Thank you, Kathleen. Isaac, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is also that it's a time and an opportunity for us as Catholics to be passionate about justice, passionate about equality, passionate about trying to understand one another in a way that's more proactive. Again, growing up, I grew up in an evangelical church. I converted when I got married. I converted to Catholicism when I got married. And what I quickly realized about Catholics is that there was this passion and this drive for working on life issues. This is a life issue. And it's one where I was reading an article in America Magazine, and it said, Catholics right now should be just as hungry for justice as they are for the Eucharist. And that really hit me in a way that I hadn't thought of before, because as we feel this sense of hopelessness and almost useless in this time where we don't know what we can do, well, we can convey that energy into going out and being passionate about doing more to create change.
Thank you. I have a question. It's directed at Kathleen, but I would love if anybody could answer this. It's a question and a comment. It says, I had 16 years of Catholic education, and this is the first time I ever heard that racism is a mortal sin. Is our students being taught this now?
So I don't know the answer to that question, because I think that, I don't teach moral theology or social justice in Catholic high school. So I don't know for sure, but I would hope so. And, like so many things, moral sin is one of those concepts that we talk about, and it's nuanced, it's complicated, right? If you grow up in a home where you don't know any different and you're taught these kinds of things, different things like that. I think what's important to remember is what Isaac said. This is considered a life issue, and the U.S. bishops have been very clear when they have described things that are fundamentally important for Catholics to work on. And so we know abortion, we know assisted suicide here in California, we know those kinds of direct taking of innocent human life. But racism is right there in that list of things that are absolutely critical for Catholics to fight against, to rid in ourselves, to rid in our societies and in our communities, and to be actively part of a solution. And so I have one suggestion for Catholic schools, Catholic high schools probably, but maybe even middle schools. If you haven't seen the movie Just Mercy, I would encourage you to watch it and read the book. Actually, read the book first if you can. But the movie, I just learned today, is actually being free streamed on Netflix right now, specifically for educators who want to share with their students. And it's a fantastic movie. It's really, really well done. The cast is amazing, but it really puts you inside a community that's hurting and that is being targeted because of their race. And I think it's a really, really good way for people to understand what this actually does. And so I would, highly recommend that. Does it say racism is a mortal sin in that movie? Of course not. But I don't know that you can walk away from watching that movie and not have that understanding.
Not to spoil the movie or anything, but what you see in the movie is fairly recent. So it just goes to kind of underscore how much more work we need to do to instill change.
I know that students have identified issues in their community. Have there been discussions and projects about racism in the community, and how are students responding in that way?
Well, not maybe racism especially, but discrimination as a big problem has something that it has come up in most of the citizenship experience we did all over the world. It doesn't matter the country. It's discrimination and bullying were like the two big problems. They came up, and students came up with a lot of different projects related to these issues that I can share afterwards. But they had done applications, they have done workshops, just the students to share with other students. They've done different projects related to this. I don't remember that racism just like that had came up in any experience, but yes, like the discrimination problem.
Right now, I really wanted to thank Kathleen, Isaac, and Martina for joining us this morning and having this conversation and helping us facilitate this conversation with all of our constituency. But we are so grateful for all your work. Martina, we are so grateful that you are working around the world to promote this culture of encounter that will lead to a more peace and just society around the world, which is so important for our students right now to receive support not only from the people in their own communities, but from students and families and educators around the world. The Catholic Education Foundation, for those of you who might be new to us, we provide tuition awards to 10,000 students every year, and that's thanks to the support of our donors. We hope that this virtual field trip can help you get a glimpse of what's going on in our communities, because as we're separated and isolated by the COVID-19 pandemic, it's so important that we can see the wonderful things that are happening in our communities, the wonderful things that our students are doing, that they're learning, and that our educators are doing to support our students. Last week, we welcomed Bishop Dave O'Connell and Xochitl Hernandez of Catholic Charities of the San Gabriel Valley. And if you'd like to view last week's event, you can see it at cefdn.org/coffeewithcef, and that has all of our other videos on there, including our field trip to Boyle Heights, our field trip to St. Elizabeth Parish and School, which is up in Altadena, and all around the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And as always, I want to thank you all for your support, for your presence, especially during this time. If you would like to learn more about Scholas Occurrentes, you can visit their website. You also can visit lacatholics.org to view Archbishop Gomez's homily on Pentecost Sunday, which addressed racial injustice and civil unrest. Thank you again all for joining us today. We have some wonderful guests with us next week. We were going to have Father Matt Elzoff and Alicia Camacho from St. Lawrence of Brindisi Elementary School, which is in Watt. So thank you again, Martina, for joining us today all the way from Argentina. Thank you, Kathleen and Isaac, for joining us. And Martina, when the next time you're in LA, I hope that I can take you out for a real coffee and catch up with you about what Scholas is doing, because I'm really, really excited to see what you have in store.
Thank you very much. And just one last message that I forgot to say. This Friday, we are having a special event where Pope Francis will give us a message. It's going to be an encounter with via Zoom, via streaming, where we are going to tell the story of Scholas, and at last Pope Francis will participate giving a message. This is at 3 p.m. from Rome, because it's going to be transmitted through the Vatican. I know it's very early in LA. I think it's like 6 a.m. But anyway, it's going to be live on our website to look at in streaming afterwards once it's finished. But you are all invited to join on Friday.
Thank you. So we're looking forward to seeing Pope Francis on Friday. Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you all.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.